welcome back to the Eras of Christ podcast. I am Pastor Paige.
I'm Megan, and we are so glad that you are with us again this week. And this week, Paige, what album are we talking about?
This week it's Speak Now. So it is the most recent Taylor's version.
It is July 7th of this year.
Yes, because we're recording it before 1989 has actually appeared.
Yes.
So you may listen to this after that, but it'll be out.
Yes.
So Speak Now is the most recent re-release.
Mhm.
It was Taylor's third album.
Correct.
And this era, we begin to see a shift in Taylor
Yes.
that we didn't see in Fearless or Debut.
Mm-hmm.
So we're looking from 2010
To 2012.
2012. This album, as she shared on the re-release, it was really important to her that she was it. She was the writer. She's helped for lots of other things for production, but she wrote every track on this album by herself.
Yes. Yes. So it's really neat to see just written by Taylor Swift. Because as we know, when she gets later on, she has, Jack Akonoff. Sorry about pronunciation of last name, but you know who I mean. And other really great writers that she works with. But Speak Now was her speaking.
Yes.
Just her voice.
Yeah. It's her story. And so it is even more confessional than Fearless.
Yeah.
Because it's not just the hopeful confessional.
Yeah.
This is, I think, a lot more honest.
Yeah. And we see that with a lot of the songs. We see a little bit more, I'm going to clap back on something that happened to me. And I'm not going to hide it in my songs like I did for Debut or Fearless.
Right.
I'm going to make it really obvious on who I'm talking about or the situations that happened that I'm talking about.
Yeah.
Very much these things happened. You all have talked about them, but now let me speak about them myself.
Right.
You have put me in this narrative. Let me say my words. And I think it just sort of helps with the rest of everything else that comes to follow.
I think so.
This was her first, let me show you what I've really been doing, what I really want to say. And that's how the rest of my career is going to be.
Right. Yeah. Yeah, there's a sense of finding her voice, which, I mean, she would have been 21, 22, 23?
19 to early 20s.
Okay. As this album is being written and the era for Speak Now, she's in her early 20s, right?
Yeah. And we know we're all discovering ourselves a lot in our early 20s.
Right.
A lot of us are graduating college, moving out of our parents' houses for the first time, figuring out who we are in this world.
Right. Right.
Without cameras in our faces.
Right.
Whereas she does not have that luxury.
She did not have that luxury. Yeah. Now, the color for this era is purple.
If you couldn't tell.
So it's my favorite color. So
yes, it was a little bit easier for her to find in her wardrobe than me. But
it was.
But I love this purple sweater.
It is beautiful. It's like mauve. I love it.
Yeah.
So this album, as we've talked about where Taylor was when it came out, it's probably a good time to touch in a little bit on where we each were.
Yes. Yeah.
When it came out, and the verses that we picked from this were a little harder.
Yes.
Than last time.
Yes, and we're going to change the rules up on how we do this every time. So just
bear with us.
Just bear with us. Because I think as we get more into the albums, there's more life things that happened to us personally when these first came out. Right. So there are multiple songs that sometimes we couldn't let go. We needed both of them. Or just, this album was just so good that you needed both songs to explain what was going on or when you first discovered this album.
Yeah.
And Paige is the one that changed that rule, so I'm going to let her start.
Well, it was hard to pick. Yeah. Partially because the first verse I picked is so different. Is so unlike what we've done before.
Yeah.
I mentioned on our last episode that Taylor's music was healing for me in this season of my life. As Megan mentioned, in the early 20s is often when people are finding themselves figuring out their own voice. Well, that isn't when it happened for me.
Okay.
In my early 20s, I was getting wifed. I got married and became a wife.
Yeah.
And in 2008, I got divorced.
Mm-hmm.
And so, still in 2010, I was finding my voice. I was a little bit older when that was happening. But Back to December ended up being a track that was really moving for me. And part of it was, I think it was the apology I wanted that I never got. But it also was one of the things that helped me see a moment when healing happened.
Okay.
And that she has this line that says, "When your birthday passed and I didn't call." I remember the first time that it was the day after my ex's birthday. And that's when I remembered that the day before was his birthday, right? And that his birthday wasn't a part of my rhythm anymore, right? There was power in that for me that made that song one that I really, really love and that was a part of my story. Just like the music from Fearless has been. The other one is more fun. It's a lot more fun. So I love the song Mean.
It's a good song.
It's a good song. I also think it tells us this is that Taylor finding her voice and how her voice is going to grow and evolve. And not just her words, but her actual voice. Right? Mean was written in response to a music critic who had talked about her voice, and she was young. Our voice as mature as we age. One of my childhood best friends is an opera singer, and she told me that it's really in your like later 20s, early 30s that your voice really starts to mature.
Interesting.
And so Taylor's voice was a 19, 20-year-old voice at the time, and he criticized it. So she comes out with this song, Mean, about him. And one of the lines that she says, "You've pointed out my flaws again, as if I don't already see them."
She has some brilliant lines.
She does. And it's so relatable, right? Any of us who've ever felt criticized, especially for things that we don't have control over, it's so easy to go, like, you think I didn't look in the mirror?
Or I didn't already know that about myself.
Right.
Yeah.
And so I love that she owns that. And she's talked about the fact that after Mean, after this album, she did a lot of work with her voice. She got some vocal training that she hadn't had before, which I think as she starts exploring different genres she needs, I also think it's part of why her voice has stayed healthy.
Yes. Why she's able to do a 2.5-year tour.
Right. That's 3.5 hours.
Yes.
Each time. I mean, and so so she's finding her voice.
She's saving her voice.
And she's learning how to use her voice, right? In this double entendre. We'll get back to that sort of dual meaning things here, but you had a couple of tracks.
I did. So when this album first came out, I had been freshly out of college about maybe 6 or 7 months, and remember driving in my car to Target to pick up the album. And I think it was the red version, because what we didn't mention is the original Speak Now was a red version and a purple version. The red version was the regular release, I believe, and then the purple version was the deluxe release.
Okay.
I believe so, or it's opposite, but I remember having it and putting the CD in the car and listening to it at the Starbucks parking lot in Strongsville and just being like, oh, she's done it again. And just being in love with this album. At the time, there was a song I always skipped, and we might be talking about that a little bit later.
Maybe that's a TikTok or something.
That might be, but there was one other one that was usually if I would just needed a song to sing along to get out something, I immediately put it on because I knew the very end of it I would be screaming along to it. And Paige witnessed that
I
at the Eras movie this past weekend?
I did. I think I took a picture.
I
but
think you did.
I think I deleted said picture because I
Thank you.
promised Megan I will never use it.
Yes. But it's Enchanted. And
Mhm.
Enchanted to me is just such a beautiful song. She's always in this huge ball gown when she's performing it. And this was my first time seeing her perform it on the Eras like screen, and the huge beautiful dress that she was in. And like
I burn, I pine, I perish.
All of the dresses that she's worn for the tour for this song. But like re-listening to the words, the lyrics that stuck out to me were our verses 4 through 6, or lines 4 through 6. Walls of insincerity, shifting eyes and vacancy, vanished when I saw your face. Mm-hmm. And as a single woman who often goes to events by herself, and she walks into a room and she sees someone that she knows, mm-hmm. whether it's someone she likes or just, oh, thank God there's someone else here that I know. All of those insecurities, everything just sort of vanishes, mm-hmm. because you are there and you're going to be my safe person during this thing.
Right.
There are several other lines in this song that I just love, especially the end chorus of the "Please don't be in love with someone else." That's the best part, to just scream out really loud. But like, yeah, those lines to me just are like, yeah, at 24, 25, there still is a lot of insecurity, and just the vacancy of people that you don't know in a room, but then all of a sudden you see that face and it's just like,
yeah,
things are going to be okay.
Right. I mean, I did that with you.
Yeah.
When we went to our first
when our first thing, and it was just like brunch. And the two of us were just like, oh, okay, good. There's someone else here that I know, and we're going to be okay. But then the other song is sort of in the same vein of that, and was one of my other favorites when I first listened to the album, is Long Live. Mm-hmm. It's track 14 on the album, and the lines are 32 and 33, and it's, long live all the mountains we moved. I had the time of my life fighting dragons with you. Mm. And those lines have just meant so much more as I've discovered who I am. Mm-hmm. Because at 24, 25, I thought I knew everything and where I was going to be in my life and what I was going to do. And I thought I had already moved to the mountains that I needed to move, had the people with me that I needed to fight dragons with. But I've realized that there are more people that I need in my corner to help me fight these dragons. And there are more people that will help me move these mountains. And so this song, I think, could be really good for both my first listen and the re-listen. But the re-listen is a different song. But it's just, I always think about the people that I grew up with, the people that I started everything with, that are the people that, don't forget about me. Don't forget about our memories that we've created together. Mm-hmm. Because those are the things that we're going to hold on to.
Right.
So yeah, those were my two songs. And I think we've quickly discovered that there'll probably be multiples on coming albums just because they're so good.
Well, and the truth is, part of the gift, the power of Taylor is her ability to use words.
Yes. Yes.
And the way that she uses language, that is one of the things about her that makes me think of Jesus.
Yes. Yeah.
Right? Jesus was a master of language. And I don't read Greek. I don't read Aramaic. I didn't do any of that in seminary.
Yeah.
I love looking back at it because I'm a total nerd. But Jesus did that. Mm-hmm. Jesus took language and twisted it and used it in unexpected ways. Mm-hmm. On this album, the song that she does that the best in is Last Kiss.
Yes.
Right?
Yeah.
I never thought we'd last kiss. Mm-hmm. Right? Is such this beautiful moment. And it made me think of how Jesus did that.
Yeah.
He took a phrase and did unexpected things with it.
Yes. Yes. Yeah. And I think it also, it's like you said, all the different ways he would say things, or you would think he meant one thing, but it was really completely different.
Right.
From what he meant. And those around him misunderstood him, and we're still misunderstanding him.
Right.
So.
Yeah. And there's a challenge in that. Now, some places he's clear.
Yes.
There are some places where he says, "You've heard it said,
Mm-hmm.
but I say."
Yeah.
And I just jumped the gun on that one a little bit because that
Yeah.
goes with another part that we
Yeah.
heard. Taylor does something on this album she hasn't done. I don't think she did on any of her other re-records.
Not yet.
She changed a lyric.
Mm-hmm.
So in the song Better Than Revenge,
Mm-hmm.
she had a line where she slut shamed a
Mm-hmm.
woman who had stolen her boyfriend.
Yes.
And she came back to the album
Mm-hmm.
10, 12 years later, 11
Mm-hmm.
years later.
Yeah.
She went, "Oh,
Mm-hmm.
I regret those words.
Yeah.
I wish I hadn't said those words."
Blame is on both of them.
Right. So she
Not just her.
Right. So she rewrote the lyric. The new lyric, I think, is way more poetic.
Oh, yes, and
Right.
much better.
Yeah.
Much
she was
better.
like a moth to a flame and she was holding the matches.
Mm-hmm.
Is much better. And
yes.
it removed the slut shaming. So
and place blame on both parties.
Right. And you see her then re-reflecting in a similar way to the way that Jesus helps us re-reflect on the laws and legal codes of the day.
Mm-hmm. Of who you're supposed to talk to, who you're not supposed to talk to, laws you're supposed to follow that you're not supposed to follow, depending on the day, the time, the month that the Pharisees wanted to put that law into effect.
Right.
Yes.
Yeah. And so Jesus says this in several places.
Mm-hmm.
He says, "You've heard it said.
Yeah.
But I say."
So you've heard it. Or he shows.
Right. Yeah. Sometimes he demonstrates that.
Yes.
And one of the places he demonstrates the power of ignoring or revising the rules is in a story that we both related to. We found in the album, but in different places.
Yes.
So why don't you tell us that story and we'll talk a little more about it.
Yeah. So the story that when we first were starting this project, one of the first stories I thought of was the woman at the well, when Paige and I were talking about what speak now means. And I was going with people he spoke to or didn't speak to, or I tend to take that very literally. And so I immediately thought of the woman at the well. Mm-hmm. And she was someone that no one talked to.
Right.
If they did, it was not nice. It was cruel. She was going to the well at the highest heat of the day because she knew no one would talk to her. They wouldn't help her. She knew it was going to be a hard job, but she still went because she needed to be able to have water. Mm-hmm. She's a woman that had been married several times beforehand, was on another relationship,
right,
with a man, as Jesus says, is not your husband,
right,
or your brother or your father. She's living with someone that she probably should not have been living with, according to the times.
Right.
She's a woman from Samaria. Jesus is a Jewish man.
And they did not talk.
They were not supposed to talk. And she knew that as the laws that she should not be talking to him, especially without anybody else present.
Right.
Especially without another man present. And she went to the well to gather water. And Jesus started talking to her. And she goes, "What are you doing? You know you're not supposed to be doing this." And he then tells her story. Yeah. And he knows who she is, sees who she is, sees that she is so much more than what her story is. And what was really interesting is Paige and I saw 2 different songs for this. And I think this is something that we're going to start happening more, is that we're going to start listening to this album and thinking of the stories that we've done and figuring out where these songs might fit. And the one I did that I saw, and I sort of explained it when I was talking about it earlier, it was Enchanted.
Yeah.
Is that, Jesus saw her and she was seen finally, and she was able to let go of those insecurities, all of those things that held her back, and just be.
Yeah.
And then go and tell this story. Like, she was able to have more pages of a story because he gave them to her and said, "No, keep talking.
Right.
Keep doing, keep showing." And that to me was how the song goes with the story. And was just a beautiful way of being seen,
Right.
you know, of Jesus seeing someone, and he does this a lot, of seeing someone that everyone else had cast aside.
Right.
And he saw her worth.
Mm-hmm.
And that's what we want to be done, is to be seen of a person of worth.
Right.
That we're more than our story.
Mm-hmm.
And that sort of ties in with the song that Paige picked.
Right.
For
Yeah.
this.
So when I was listening to it again, Innocent drew me to this story.
Mm-hmm.
And Innocent is such a beautiful, encouraging song, especially when you don't mix it up with its story, right?
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
When you separate it from its story, it has even more. I mean, is even more to it to
Yes.
me.
Yes.
So I thought of what Jesus might have said to that woman,
Mm-hmm.
because he said something to her, because she walked away from there and she told everyone about Jesus and they listened.
Yes, they did.
That is the amazing thing about it. So
Mm-hmm.
I imagine that he said to her, who you are is
Mm-hmm.
not where you've been. Who you are is not what you did.
Mm-hmm.
That he knew that
Yeah.
she didn't choose to have been married 5 times.
Mm-hmm.
She probably didn't choose to live with this man who wasn't her husband.
Yeah, but she needed someone to live with.
Right.
So she could have food and have provisions for herself.
Right. Have a place to use the water that she was gathering at noon,
A
right?
place to sleep.
Yeah.
Food, clothing, all the things.
So Jesus in that moment says, you're not defined. Yes, you've been married 5 times. Yes, the man you live with is not your husband. And
you're not defined by that.
You're not defined by that.
Mm-hmm.
And those 2 lines
Mm-hmm.
are my new verses from Speak Now, are my Taylor life verses from this album.
Mm-hmm.
Who you are is not where you've been.
Yeah.
And who you are is not what you did.
Yeah.
Are, for me, encapsulate the whole of my faith, is remembering that God through Christ frees us from the things that we did that weren't who we are now.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah, exactly.
Right?
Yeah.
That we grow and we evolve, and that with God we continue to take that journey.
And it's just a part of our story.
Right.
Not the whole part.
Yeah.
It's just a part of who we are.
Yeah. And her story continues because she keeps talking about Jesus. I mean, it's such a cool moment. And as women who preach, right?
Yeah.
She's the first person to go and tell people. The first evangelist was a woman.
Yeah.
And I love it.
Yes.
I love it. Now, telling the story of Jesus is sort of transitions well to one of the other stories you picked for this.
Yeah. So one of the other story that I thought of is sending the 12. But at the end of Jesus's life, after he's been raised from the dead and before he ascends to heaven, I have told you all of these things. I have shown you all of these things. Now go and do. Go and make disciples of all the nations. Go and move the mountains. Go and fight the dragons. Long live. Is the one that I put with it, because they did all of these things together. Those disciples traveled with Jesus. They were a part of all of these things. Just as Taylor's talking about all of the things that us fans have been a part of, her band has been a part of. You know, she's had the critics. Jesus, we know he had critics.
Right.
People that didn't think he should be doing what he's doing. Taylor thinking that she shouldn't be doing what she's doing, speaking out. But he's saying, keep doing this.
Right.
Keep making the waves. Keep moving the mountains. Keep pushing the envelope, pushing things. Keep fighting the dragons that keep popping up. And to me, that is, yes, Jesus sent the 12 out several times, but that last time of, I'm leaving you now, keep doing.
Right.
Keep fighting, keep moving. So that is to me very much long live.
Well, and I think that's such a good connection, right? There's
Mm-hmm.
this great line in Long Live that's one of our God connections
Yes,
in it,
yes.
where it says, if God forbid, if fate should step in, and
Mm-hmm.
she continues that the relationship
Yeah.
ends, that if you have children someday, they'll see the pictures and you'll tell them my name.
Mm-hmm.
And that is what we do, right?
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
We have pictures, stories of Jesus that we tell because the disciples
Uh-huh.
did what Jesus asked in that
Yeah.
moment.
Yeah. It was that moment to continue that story. That the
Yeah.
story doesn't end. And we know her story doesn't end with this album. We still have 7 more albums
Mm-hmm.
to go through as of right now.
Right.
You know, this is wonderful that could be a forever thing because we know she's going to keep releasing music.
Yeah.
So, you know, we'll have more eras to look at, but you know, her story keeps moving just as Jesus's keeps going.
Right.
You know?
Yeah. And it goes on through the people,
Mm-hmm.
right, who've lived it.
Yeah. Yeah. I think you had a really great song to go with some of the smaller people that came to Jesus.
Yeah. Jesus had this power, and this is that speaking, right?
Mm-hmm.
To speak for those who didn't have a voice,
Yeah.
right? And there are a couple of moments in
Mm-hmm.
scripture where he does this. I'm going to do the easy one first. And that's in 3 gospels, Matthew,
Mm-hmm.
Mark, and Luke. Jesus says in some way, let
Mm-hmm.
the children come,
Mm-hmm.
right?
Yeah.
And I can picture him with the children around him,
Yeah.
telling them to never grow up.
Yeah.
Right, to
Yeah.
keep that childlike faith. He says
Mm-hmm.
that as well.
Yes.
The gift of that, that everything to you is funny,
Mm-hmm.
right? That
Yeah.
is such a gift. And so that moment, I kept thinking of that
Yeah.
with that song.
Mm-hmm.
The other is when Jesus speaks up for a woman
Mm-hmm.
who was caught in adultery.
Yes. Yeah.
And she is brought to him by the Pharisees. This is recorded in John.
Okay.
And she had been found
Mm-hmm.
in adultery. I mean, that's what they say,
Yeah.
right? Like,
yeah.
And
However she was found.
however she was found. And this is a moment where Jesus reinterprets the law
Mm-hmm.
as well.
Yeah.
Where the Pharisees say, well, the law says we can stone her.
Mm-hmm.
Where's
Yeah.
the man?
Part of the story we don't get.
Right?
Yeah.
Maybe he was one of the Pharisees. Anyway, so Jesus, in that moment, gets down on the ground and writes something in the sand. Now, we don't know what he wrote.
Mm-hmm.
We don't know what he wrote. But then he says to them, let he without sin cast the first stone.
Very famous line that I think we all know.
Right.
Very well.
Right. And in that moment, I feel like it comes back to mean for me,
Mm-hmm.
where, you know,
Yes.
where Jesus is like, somebody made you cold,
Mm-hmm.
you know? So don't forget that you are just like this woman.
Uh-huh. Yeah.
Mean is also a song where she's defending herself.
Yeah.
And you may not realize this. I think this isn't as well known of a story as the
Okay.
woman caught in adultery, that Jesus had to defend himself early,
So many times.
but early in his ministry.
Okay.
So in Luke 4, we
Okay.
hear the story of Jesus' first sermon at his home church. Have you preached at your home church?
I have. I've gotten to preach there 3 times. And
Okay.
I love it. It was
And
so
there's-
much nice.
Right, there's something about
Very
it
nice. Yeah. There is.
that is really cool. So I've preached at the church that raised me into ministry,
Okay.
but not the church I was raised in.
Okay.
So Jesus goes home to Nazareth, and he preaches at his home church, and he quotes Isaiah, and it's this great sermon where he says this is what he's going to do: get and proclaim release to the captive, recovery of sight to the blind,
all the things he's going to do,
all the things I'm going to do, and declare the year of the Lord's favor.
Mm-hmm.
And he makes some people angry.
Surprise.
Shocking face. right?
Yeah.
Shocked face.
Yeah.
He makes some people mad. And so they chase him out of the synagogue and try to throw him off a cliff.
Couple years too early.
Right. So Jesus somehow just like avoids being noticed, like he pulls his cap down or something. But in that moment, I think he's also like me, and also reminds me of that.
Yes. Yeah.
Where like, why you gotta be so mean?
Yeah. I'm just telling you the truth of what I'm gonna do.
Right.
Yeah.
So that was the other one where he also stands up for himself.
Yes. Yeah.
So
yeah.
This particular album
Mm-hmm.
bubbled up a lot of different stories.
Yes.
And has some interesting God references.
Yes.
You
yes.
found those this
yes.
time.
I think when I'm listening to these albums now with these questions that we come up with in my head, I think they're going to start popping out more.
Mm-hmm.
Because as I was listening to the album, all of a sudden it was me quickly pulling out my phone and opening our notes to put in what I was hearing, because it was, oh my gosh, I had to make sure we remember this.
Right.
And in Timeless, which is one of the vault tracks from Speak Now, it's about her grandparents. At least that's the story, is that it's about her grandparents. And one of the lines is, and I prayed to God, you be coming home all right.
Mm-hmm.
And it's about the time when they went off to war and the men went off to war. And it was the woman praying that he came home, but not just that he came home, but he came home all right.
Right. Yeah.
And I think we can say that we all do that prayer for people we love, that we pray they get somewhere safely, or they come back to us okay. That it's not just that they come back to us,
right,
but that they're all right.
Right.
That sort of prayer protection to sort of make us calm, even though most of the times we can't control the situation.
Right. That we need to calm down.
Yes. We just need to calm down.
Sorry. It's not time for lover yet.
It's not time for lover yet. But yes, that we need to sort of just, I'm going to hand it over to God.
Mm-hmm.
God's going to protect you, because I can't control the situation.
Right.
Especially with war. I cannot control the situation.
Right.
The other two I found should be no shocker if you've listened this far into our episode yet. The first one's from Enchanted.
Shocking.
Said no one. This is me praying that this was the very first page. And this to me is very much a Taylor line. One of her later songs is called The Story of Us, where she talks about different chapters and how it ended, and is a great song. But this to me is like sort of, this is the story of us, like prequel.
Yeah.
Sort of like the prologue of like, I hope there's more than just a first page. I hope there's more than just us seeing each other from across the room.
Right.
You know, I hope that God has written more of our story.
And
I think a lot of us, for, you know, whatever reason, we hope there's more than just this.
Right.
Or there's more than just this right now. For whatever that might be. You know, like, what's the next chapter going to be?
Right.
So I hope this is just the first page.
Yeah, and that there's more story to come.
Yes.
And that it's a good story.
Yeah. And then Paige had mentioned earlier this is long lived, but if God forbid fate should step in. It's just such a good line. I mean, she doesn't write a bad line. These are all so good, but this one is sort of like if God's going to step in and change this, at least we've had the memories.
Right.
At least we've had these experiences. Good, bad, and different. We've at least had this together.
Yeah.
So yeah, those were my three that I found this time. You're usually the one that finds all of them, but I think you found the most fun one with like the most fun history to it.
Well, I mean, this whole album, right?
Yeah.
Is called Speak Now.
Yes.
And yes, it's about Taylor finding her voice and about her having a voice. And that is not what the song Speak Now is about.
No,
I mean,
no.
It's
sort of.
Right.
Yeah.
So in Speak Now, she is doing something she loves to do and she's good at doing, where she takes a pretty well-known phrase and playing with it and pulling on it and
making a story around that one phrase.
Right. Yeah. Right. And she does this in other albums. But this one, she says, it's Speak Now or forever hold your peace, right? That allegedly is in a wedding liturgy.
Yeah. It's
It's not there. I mean, at least not in the Methodist liturgy.
no.
And
So if you're a different denomination, let us know if it's in your liturgy.
right. And I mean, I've never said it in a wedding. I've done several. Wasn't
Yeah.
in my wedding. Maybe it should have been. Anyway, uh you know, it's one of those things that it's like
Yeah.
a cultural phenomenon, and there was a reason for it hundreds of years ago.
Yeah. And there's a reason why it's still funny in movies or TV shows or books,
Right.
because you want to have that person to come in and just be like, hold on.
Right.
Yeah.
Right. And I mean, and in the story, she's saying, no, I'm the one you should be with, right? And who doesn't dream of having two great loves
Yes.
at the same
Yeah.
time? I guess
Yeah.
maybe.
Yeah.
I don't know. It seems like a lot of work.
Yes.
And so it was very funny. We were talking about this. I said, we
Mhm.
probably should tell people, like, that's not really in
Yeah.
wedding liturgies anymore.
Yeah.
And maybe
But
should
we
leave
all
it out.
know about it.
Right.
But it's, you know, these cultural references that we get it in more
Yeah.
so than anything else.
Than the actual church.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
So it's not
Yes.
really a God reference, but
No, but
she's in a
God
church.
is in church.
Right.
So it is
Yeah.
a God reference in that way.
It is. It
Yeah.
is. So this album, you know, we see Taylor finding her voice, using
Mhm.
language beautifully. I
Mhm.
think those are a couple of the ways that it really ties in
Yeah.
with the Jesus story.
Yeah.
And I think there is one other thing we haven't done yet.
Which is what is that?
Well, Megan, you haven't told us your Speak Now verse.
Oh yes, my re-release verse. Those words get harder at the end of the day, y'all.
They do.
They do. Yeah, so much like I can remember where I was when I first listened to this album, I can remember where I was when I listened to it at the re-release.
Okay.
So this was released on July 7th, 2023. I'm a Swiftie, have been a Swiftie for a very long time, but I'm now one of those Swifties that waits till midnight for the album because I need to hear it as soon as it drops in Apple Music.
Right. And the Taylor's version, not the stolen version.
Yes, the Taylor's version. And I immediately, as soon as it was 12:01, hit play and started listening to it again and thought back to where I was in 2010 and life events that had happened since then and preceded that. And got to one song and was doing great.
Mm-hmm.
And then all of a sudden the tears came.
Oh no. That was like me in the movie.
Yes. And it was because, yes, I had heard the song in 2010, but it just hit me very differently in 2023.
Yeah.
And that's the song Never Grow Up.
Okay.
I started listening to it and, like I said, was doing great. Then all of a sudden I got to the line, memorize what it sounded like when your dad gets home. Remember the footsteps, remember the words said. And my dad passed away in 2005. And yes, like I said, the album came out in 2010. I think this song happened. I didn't listen to the words. I just was like, oh, that's nice. But
Sweet.
but Best Day is more of a song about me and my mom. So I'm, you know, whatever. But hearing this again and having worked through the almost 18 years of grief, the 18 years of him not being here, and remembering, and I think it was sounded like, it was in past tense. And I'm like, yeah, I do remember what it sounds like when Dad pulled in the driveway and opened the front door and said good evening to me and Mom. And just remembering how it was sort of like, we're all back together. And so, yes, that is my re-release listen lyric is Never Grow Up, song 8, verse 35. Yeah. Yeah.
That's a moving moment.
It is. Yes. And I think this whole album just sort of was the re-listen of it. This is an album, as I mentioned earlier, I don't listen to all the time. And it was because one track, and we're just going to talk about it because we
All
need
right.
to, because
It's yours.
it is, and because we want to know what your track 5 is. And the track 5 on this album is Dear John. As well as being a Swiftie, I am a John Mayer fan. It reconciles in my brain, so
Both
it's okay.
ands. We can have the
Yes,
both.
we
and
can
the
have the
and.
both.
It's fine.
And when I first heard the song, I did not enjoy it. And I would skip it. And in fact, it was never in my iTunes or my Apple Music until the re-release. Like I completely deleted it
Wow.
from my thing.
Okay.
But then she went on her Eras tour. And about a week or so before this album came out, she played it as a surprise song.
Mm-hmm.
And she started the surprise song with, I love this song so much, and I'm so proud of how I wrote it. But we need to remember these things happened millions of years ago. Let it just be a song.
Right. Oh, wow.
Don't let it be more than that. And so I was like, okay, Taylor, for you, I will re-listen to this when it comes out and not skip it.
Okay.
It's now one of my favorite songs.
It's
so good because
it's so well written.
It is so well written. It's beautiful because, yes, we 99.9% know who it was written about. But I think it could be any sort of situation of someone that was young in love with someone that was older than you and just being like, don't take advantage of me just because I'm younger.
Right.
Or don't hurt me because I don't know as much as you. So I think looking at it that way, which we've done with a lot of these stories and these songs, is a great way to sort of figure, okay, what was Jesus's track 5
right
for Speak Now? And I think for me, and I have a feeling you'll probably have a different answer than me on this, mine is The Woman at the Well, is his track 5. Just because that was sort of his moment of saying, I see you. I know who you are. Now go and tell people how I can save their lives as well.
Right. And I actually don't have a different answer.
You don't?
No,
I thought
agree.
I thought it was going to be the woman adulterer.
I mean, that's a powerful moment.
Yes.
But the woman at the well, Jesus says, I'm going to risk something to see you. Jesus' disciples, right after that story, Jesus' disciples get back and they're like, what are you doing? You can't talk to her.
And he's like, well, actually I can.
Because I'm Jesus.
I'm the Son of God.
Right? I can do what I want.
Yes.
I mean, and so the power in that moment of Jesus laying himself, risking himself to talk to this woman who's a Samaritan, who's a woman, who has had 5 husbands, who's had some life.
Yes.
Right?
Yeah.
That is such a telling moment in the Jesus story. And I mentioned earlier as women pastors, the story of the first evangelist being a woman.
Yeah.
I mean, that.
Yeah, it's a very track 5.
It is. I think so. And but if you've got another one, please let us know.
Yeah, because as you know, on Sunday, we will post our Sunday question, which is, what would you add to the Speak Now Jesus era? And what would your track 5 be? And what is your verse or your song that maybe when you first listen to it and when you re-listen to it? Because we would love to know that. Yeah,
it's always great to hear your stories, how you relate to the albums. The truth is that just as the Jesus story has a major impact on our lives to heal us, to change us, to help us grow, so do the music. So does music, and Taylor's music is in particular so powerful for that, especially for women. Because she has such a strong voice,
and she gives us a lot of words that we can say. And a lot of things that we can scream at the Eras movie.
It's true.
That might be another episode where we talk about the Eras movie.
Yeah.
Well, too much fun.
Highly recommend. Yes. We also recommend that you visit our website, which is pastorswifties.com. We'll have our show notes there. You can see some of the different things that we thought about, some of the scripture passages for the stories that we mentioned, and even probably some other stuff from our work as we do this.
Yes. And don't forget to subscribe to our podcast wherever you can find podcasts. So Apple Podcasts, Spotify, Amazon, Google, Podbean, and YouTube.
Right. And if you feel so moved, if you'll leave us a review, that helps other people find us. And if you're sharing our podcast with others, we thank you so much. We're having so much fun.
We are. And please make sure you interact with us on Instagram and Facebook, because we will be there posting some more behind the scenes stuff and just all the Pastor Swifty things.
Right. Yeah. So we're your Pastor Swifties, and we have a PS to send us off with.
Our PS. So let us pray. Dear God, help us to speak now and not be mean to those we meet out in this world, for our words matter. And even though we never want to grow up, let us be timeless in our love for you. For the story of us is just beginning and will long live in all that we do. In your Son's most holy and precious name, we pray. Amen.
Amen. Friends, now go use your voice. Speak up for yourself and for others, and go and make beautiful music and have beautiful lives. Have a great week.
See you next time.